I will call to order and welcome all of you to the March 1st, 2022 meeting of the Salem Planning Commission. Shelby, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine?
Here.
Commissioner Ickes?
Here.
Commissioner Fott?
Present.
Commissioner Goebel?
Sorry, I'm here.
Commissioner Griggs?
Here.
Commissioner Heller?
Here.
Commissioner Kopcho is absent. Commissioner Levin?
Here.
And Commissioner Slater?
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Shelby. We'll move to item 3, public comment. We have 3 individuals that are signed up to each speak to us for no more than 3 minutes. The first one is Jason Stats. He's speaking to us on item 6.1. And as a reminder, please state your name and address for the record. Jason, you can go ahead and welcome to our meeting.
May I please share? Oh, thank you so much. My name is Jason Stats. I am a business. I live in Ward 1. I also do business in Ward 1. I have a lot of other public service commitments, and none of my views today reflect that of those particular commitments. This is just me speaking as a business owner. As it comes to signage and street signage opportunities in the city of Salem, as a business owner, it's very challenging. So I want to express that one, sidewalk signage, temporary signage, things of these nature boost business almost 40% instantly. And it's very difficult to understand the current city language in how to operate. I feel that the city in its current enforcement is very proactive versus reactive. And again, just finding common information or getting availability on what's available. We own a small store called Across the Street Vintage and Resale on Edgewater and McNary. And right here, you can see these areas. I couldn't even get a response from the city of what these areas were called other than public right-of-way. Here's some other pictures. Pretty big here. I mean, this piece here, and then also highlighted here, these little pop-outs across the street. Anything there would not inhibit somebody in a wheelchair or with a disability to be able to use that or block the street. Also, I'd like to say with traffic is as fast as it is on Edgewater, trying to get it to slow down. And of course, there's a lot of talk about 20 is plenty. Getting the traffic to slow down under the current signage rules and lack thereof information on what we could do with it. I couldn't even put a slow down sign to help protect young people, students in the neighborhood crossing those streets. We get hit nearly all the time. So under the current sign ordinances, I can't even find I couldn't even put out a slow down sign if I wanted to. This is a safety concern for the community. It has to be addressed. And businesses need the opportunity to find fair placement of advertising through sidewalk signs, sandwich board signs, and the city is missing a huge opportunity to make revenue from it.
Mr. Stats, you're out of time if you want to wind it up.
That's all I needed to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Slater has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Stats, for joining us today and sharing that concern. Just to help me understand, what do you think is a reasonable duration for a temporary sign?
Well, I think I think a reasonable duration of a temporary sign is, I mean, define temporary. If I put it out in the morning and I bring it in the evening and I don't leave it out there, then that's temporary. It wasn't out there all day long. It didn't hinder anything at night. It was well cared for, and it was the responsibility of the business owner to retrieve it at the end of their business day. I think that ongoing. I mean, it depends on how you want to define temporary.
I
But
guess
I
my
think the
concern was
definition should be looked at.
how do we ensure that a temporary sign doesn't convert to a permanent occupation of one person's space? That's where I was concerned about it.
Oh, fairness. Again, maybe the city needs to look at first come, first serve and permitting temporary signs for a period of time. Maybe you can do it indefinitely. If nobody else is looking to put, I see what you're saying. If you have 10 sandwich board signs or sidewalk signs in that space that probably would be okay, then that becomes a problem. But if there's not that competition, then maybe there's just a fair system. You can have a temporary sign out there, once a month. If there's nobody else who has applied for that, then why shouldn't somebody be able to pay the city to continue to utilize that opportunity?
Thank you. That was helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Stats? Not seeing any little hands raised. So thank you very much for your time. And now I
Much
know where your
appreciated.
business is. That's awesome. Okay, next up, we have Mr. Easterly. Welcome back. Again, you have 3 minutes and name and address for the record. And take it away.
Thank you, President Griggs, council members. I'm E.M. Easterly, Ward 8. I thank Commissioner Slater for raising the procedural issues you will discuss this evening. Commission members, you are a volunteer body appointed by the Salem City Council with legally defined responsibilities as detailed in SRC 6.040, ORS 227.090, and the adopted Planning Commission rules. The Commissioner's legal duties include advise City Council on land use matters, advise City Council regarding Goal 1 citizen involvement responsibilities, affirm the legality and factual credulity of land use applications, and serve as quasi-judicial review bodies of administratively approved land use actions. City employees are a resource that commission members must rely on. However, no employee's point of view supersedes the legal responsibilities of the Planning Commission as to relevant facts and code requirements when making land use decisions. The Planning Commission is subordinate only to City Council. The Commission is not subordinate to the Community Development Department. City employees are the Planning Commission staff. For example, City Attorney provides legal and parliamentarian advice, and Community Development employees provide administrative support services for the Commission. Commissioner Slater posed a very basic question. Is there a Planning Commission role in hearing or addressing neighborhood association grievances in the land use process? The question is relevant because the Commission failed to follow its own rules, that is, Robert's Rules of Order. It is not staff, but the presiding officer who must rule on a point of order request. The presiding officer made no such ruling, therefore the actions and decisions subsequently made by the Planning Commission were out of order.
Mr. Easterly,
asked the
could you
planning-
wrap up because your time is up then? You could-
All right, sorry.
conclusion.
Commission to correct this obvious procedural error and establish processes which will allow applicants and appellants to challenge city employees who make unsubstantiated claims after the record is closed.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, President Griggs.
Thank you, Mr. Easterly. Questions for Mr. Easterly? I am not seeing any hands raised. So thank you for your time. Well, Mr. Anderson, you're up next. Again, 3 minutes. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you, Chairman Griggs and Commissioners. Steve Anderson, West Salem Neighborhood Association Land Use Chair, Ward 8. Our last meeting, we raised a point of order, and our vice chair was worried that he stepped into it. And I want to reassure you that he did not. The issue was a point of order, and under Robert's Rules of Order, the neighborhood association had standing in this procedures and was perfectly within its bounds to raise the issue. However, there was discussion about ex parte and going through staff. As I thought about it, I would suggest to this commission, as you have your conversations on item 10.1, that we consider making the city attorney or the legal office the procedural member of this group. If the commission wants to not take those directly and fear of getting information they shouldn't look at, then maybe we should submit that directly to the city attorney to help the chair rule on it. But the chair, and in case of Robert's Rules of Order, we have standing. There was a procedural issue about the introduction of new information, and we were within our rights to raise that issue, and that issue was not discussed. It was gone into another discussion. As another part of that, there was some discussion about timelines, and I would like to let you know that we support your looking into timelines and better time for the commission to have times. That was 2100 Dokes Ferry was a very complicated case. Part of the problem is that the traffic engineer produced his original report prior to receiving the original comments of the neighborhood association. Therefore, that was not in the original staff report after our comments. And that came up in a later submittal to this group after the record was closed, not available for hearing or community comment. I think as you go through this discussion, there needs to be time for everyone to review it. And when staff makes their report and decisions prior to receiving comments from the public in the initial comment phase, not going into the original staff report, that precludes the public as well as the commission from having time to look at this. So I would encourage you to work on that and support your efforts there, as we see that would be valuable to your decision-making and to the public input under goal 1. So as the point of order, we believe that we have a right that should be included as part of your procedures. It is there under Robert's Rules of Order already, but it needs to be clarified. And as to timelines, we support you in terms of making sure you have enough time to review these complicated matters. And so I thank you for your service, and that's my comments tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Questions for Mr. Anderson? Bless you, Commissioner Ekus. I think you just sneezed. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So thank you for your time. I'm sure both of you will be listening to that agenda item when we get to it.
Well, good fortune to you there.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, guys. We'll move on to consent calendar. For the record, I would like to state that I did listen to the hearing and I am prepared to vote on the minutes. I will look to Commissioner Levin for a motion.
Yes, this is Commissioner Levin. I have reviewed the draft minutes of the February 15th, 2022 Planning Commission hearing, and I approve and recommend adoption and enter into the record.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Was that Commissioner Slater? I can only see the top of your head, Commissioner.
I
Slater.
know, I have to fix
Yes.
that, so I apologize.
It's okay. Now I can see it
I have a
right
very comfy chair. It's
Sit up straight.
the problem.
Okay, so we have a motion by Levin, seconded by Slater. Discussion on the motion to approve the minutes under the consent calendar. No discussion. Shelby, will you please call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you are opposed.
Commissioner Augustine,
Aye.
Commissioner Ekus,
Aye.
Commissioner Fott,
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel.
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Heller,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
And Kopcho is absent.
Thank you. Motion passed. Moving on to public hearings, we do not have any. Under item 6, special orders of business. Mr. Panko, you are up to discuss the sign code work session.
Thank you, and good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Aaron Panko with the Community Development Department. Hopefully you can all see me and hear me. And let's see, can you see the screen I'm sharing here?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Aaron Panko. We're here to begin our first work session talking about updating Salem sign code. I'm also joined by Stephanie Weil, our zoning inspector. So a bit of a background. Salem sign code went through its last major revision in 2012. And in 2017, staff began the process of updating our sign code. It included some minor changes, updating submittal requirements for sign permits, updating some of our zones and overlays to match what's in the current zoning code. We were proposing some changes to our sign illumination standards, the methodology for measuring and regulating brightness of signs. And then we were looking to create some new exemptions for public art and art markers. This proposal also included eliminating the permit requirement that we had for temporary signs. And that seemed to be a contentious item that kind of put the sign code amendment process on hold. So 2017, the city, we didn't have great resources for responding to complaints about signs. We didn't have a sign inspector or any easy means of enforcement. So that seemed to be a major issue for our city council. And they gave us direction on doing a better job basically of enforcing the sign code for temporary signs. So in 2020, the city also put forward another amendment to our sign code. This was specifically for menu boards. This went to the Planning Commission, I believe, early 2020. We had some feedback from industry representatives about some limits that the current code provided for menu boards. So with this 2017 sign code, with the 2020 amendments here for menu boards, we knew that there was some work to be done on the sign code. After the menu board discussion here, staff began the process of really taking a full look at our sign code and doing a comprehensive rewrite basically on that. So that kind of leads us to where we are today. So we've been working for the last year plus on rewriting the sign code to address the enforcement issue. Staff has hired a zoning inspector specifically to go out and deal with sign code violations. So Lisa, did you want to add anything to the background before we get into temporary signs, which is our discussion for tonight?
I just wanted to introduce Stephanie because she is out there in the field almost all day, every day, collecting the signs in the right of way and helping people get through the sign permitting process or, correcting the issues that they have. And like Aaron said, that was the big issue before with the sign code and been kind of a gap in our services since the recession when the previous positions were eliminated. And then Stephanie will help answer questions if you have any questions about our enforcement process or what she's seen out in the field. Some of the amendments that we're proposing are intended to address the issues that she's seen out in the field that we're encountering.
All right, thanks, Lisa. So I'm going to talk about temporary signs tonight. And there's kind of two categories here: temporary signs that require a permit through the city, and temporary signs that are exempt from permit requirements, but the city does have standards for. So the first one to talk about here is balloons. So we've added a definition for what a temporary balloon is. So our old code did have some standards for balloons. So you see on the left-hand side here, we had standards for these inflatable balloons. I believe the height was limited to 35 feet or something like that. They have to be held down by cables to withstand wind loads. But we didn't have in our current code any way of regulating some of these more common balloons that we see, these wind-driven balloons. So on the right-hand side, you see a wind dancer, which is pretty common. So the sign code that we're proposing distinguishes between these two. So we have wind-driven balloons and we have non-wind-driven balloons. And we've added standards for the wind-driven balloons. The maximum height for these is 18 feet. And then we have a setback requirement that we added that's 1 foot setback from a street for every foot of height that the sign is. These type of display do require a permit under the current code, and we're going to maintain that going forward. The display limit on these is 14 days, and applicants can get a maximum of 2 permits per year for a balloon display. The other thing that we're adding in our proposal here is that a development site can choose between one balloon or a pennant style display. So I'll talk about pennants a little bit later, but right now under the current code, they can have multiple display types. So we're proposing that to try to limit the amount of signage, they get to pick one or the other to be displayed at any one time. The next one we have here is temporary banners. So a permit is required to place a banner on a building. We've added a definition for what a banner is. The maximum display area we have for banners is 50 square feet, and they must be attached to a building. So that's part of the current code. We're not making any changes to that standard. The display period for these is being clarified. So right now, an applicant can ask for a permit for a 30-day display period, and they can have up to 4 permits per year. The current code allows multifamily uses to have a longer display period. They can have up to 60 days for a display. We're changing that allowance so that all banners across the board have that 30-day limit, and then 4 permits per year. The other change we're making for banners is the current code really doesn't address how to distribute banners amongst sites that might have multiple businesses on a development site. So the allowance is based on street frontage currently. So if you're on one street, you can only have 1 banner regardless of the number of businesses that could be in your shopping center. If you have 2 street frontages, you get 2 banners. So our proposal here is to look at the number of uses on the development site, and each use within the shopping center would have the allowance of 1 banner. The final clarification we're making is we have a development standard that requires these banners to be attached to a building on all 4 corners. They can't be attached to fences. They can't be attached to light poles, to trees. There's kind of a gap here where we have temporary tents. We see these around 4th of July for fireworks stands. We see them Christmas tree sales commonly. We're allowing banners in those cases where you have a temporary tent that has a permit issued to also have a temporary banner for that. Next one we have here is pennants. Pennants, we've added a definition for what these are. When I think of pennants, I usually think of like the flags that you see on the left-hand side. But this display style here has been used also for these feather flags, which are, I think, much more common that we see here in the city. We don't really have good standards currently for pennant displays. Somebody can get a permit for this display for up to 6 months. And there's really no limit on display area, and there's no limit on height for these. So our code clarifies in the definitions, again, what these are. And then it puts on there a height limit. So the feather flag styles that you see here on the right-hand side, the maximum height for those would be 13 feet. We're adding a display area limit of no more than 50 square feet. So that would be total. So if you have multiple flags here, we would look at the total display that they're proposing and make sure it's under that 50 square foot allowance. Again, currently there's no limit. You get one temporary permit and you can have basically as many of these as you want. So we're doing that. And again, with the balloons, we're allowing folks to choose one display or the other at any one time. And then sidewalk signs. Currently, the city does allow sidewalk signs, but only in the central business district downtown. They do require a permit currently. The permit is valid for up to an entire year. We're not looking to change the standards for these. I mean, the display surface is limited to 6 square feet. The height allowance is 30 inches. But Mr. Stats, I think, had a good picture that explains, I guess, what we're trying to do here is expand this to areas outside of the central business district. So you'll see it's common for a building to be built right up to the property line. That's the case with this building here. There's really no area for somebody to place a sign other than in the right of way on a sidewalk. So in these cases, outside of the central business district, the city would, or is proposing to allow sidewalk signage when there's really no other option for placing signage there. So that would work in the example that Mr. Stats brought up, where we have a large sidewalk, but no other place for a sidewalk sign to be placed on the property. So the allowance there would be one sidewalk sign per business. And then we have, again, the category of temporary signs that do not require a sign permit. So the first one, and again, the most common that we see here is lawn signs. So we're not looking to make any major changes to the lawn sign allowance. The maximum display area we have for that is 6 square feet, maximum 30 inches in height. These signs can be displayed 60 days and 2 times per year. The issue that we see most commonly with lawn signs is their placement. They're required to be placed on private property, but oftentimes they'll be placed like in a landscape strip closer to the street and public right of way. So the sign code doesn't allow any type of temporary sign to be placed in the right of way, and that's not changing. Rigid signs, this is a new definition that we've created. What the current sign code has is a definition for portable sign. That's a little confusing. So rigid sign is a new definition. This category includes a few different type of signs that are a bit more substantial than the lawn signs. It includes real estate signs. So you'll commonly see these driven into the ground. And then it also includes signs on their own kind of self-supporting structure. These signs are designed to meet a wind load of up to 80 miles per hour. We're not looking to make any changes again to the development standards. The height allowance for these rigid signs is up to 6 square feet. The display area that's allowed is based on the size of the property. So we're not looking to make any changes there. The display period, it's up to a year. There's no permit requirement. They can be displayed a year. So there's really not a time limit on these types of displays. And then finally, we're clarifying sidewalk signs that are on private property. So we talked about the use of the public sidewalk. Previously, those do require a permit, but on private property, so like within a development site, like in a parking lot leading to a shopping center, there's an allowance here for each business to have a sidewalk sign that directs customers within that site to their business entrance. So the development standards for these would be the same: 6 square feet in display area, 30 inches in height. And then we've added that they can only be displayed during operating hours for the business, and that they shouldn't be in a place that obstructs the free use of the pedestrian pathway. So that's the end of my kind of walkthrough of our changes here on temporary signs. So thank you.
Commissioners, if you have a question, if you could raise your hand, that would be great. I had one question. So, Commissioner Levin, go ahead.
Thank you, President Griggs. Aaron, thanks for the presentation, and solid beard you've got.
Thank you.
Something that stuck out to me that I see as being potentially problematic is the feather signs and limiting the total square footage to 50 square feet. For an individual, like some kind of scalability there, it doesn't seem to be in the existing language where, like, for a single business, I could see 50 square feet on a 13-foot tall overall sign breaks down to roughly 2 feathers, where you'd have roughly about 12.5 feet on each one for potential display. But then I'm thinking about larger facilities that would have multiple, and in that regard, it seems like, boy, if you had like a lot of street frontage and something big like a car lot, then does like 2 feather signs really make sense for something that is like multiple acres in size compared to, I don't know, like the front, like in the picture that's here, that might be like the driveway entrance into an apartment complex, and that's like those feathers are out on the corner or something. So I would encourage that staff look at adding some language that provides scalability, but I would ask if that was at all discussed in the planning or forethought of these, and if that's already been kind of reviewed.
Yeah, so I think we're coming or approaching this as right now we don't have any standards for these, and we have heard some complaints about just the volume of these type of displays. So again, our goal is to create a definition for what these are, and to start out by creating some development standards that would put some sort of limits on there. I don't know how we landed exactly on 50 square feet, but that's the kind of feedback we're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Commissioner Levin, our goal overall is to reduce the amount of temporary signage because of the just sheer volume of complaints that we get. And I think these flutter flags are ones that people really are not a fan of because they blow over. People don't, write them. They keep them up too long. They start to get ragged. I don't know if Stephanie, you have anything you want to say about your kind of enforcement or timeout in the field related to these, but it seems like once somebody spends the money to buy it, then they want to hang on to it forever. And they definitely want to put them, all up and down the street to grab attention. And that's the kind of complaints that we get. It's just too much kind of visual clutter. And these are so big, right? They really grab your eye. And so it's like, well, if one grabbed my eye, do I need to see 22 as I drive down the street for one business? So I don't know, maybe there's somewhere in between, what you're talking about and what we have proposed, but that's what our thoughts were when we tried to propose capping it. Yeah.
Thank you. Stephanie, did you want to add anything to that, or did Lisa capture that pretty well?
I wish I had my pictures uploaded from today. I took pictures of places that literally had like threads hanging from the thing because they were holding on to them for so long. And I had another one where it was like it had blown over and it was blocking seeing out to get out of a driveway.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely those issues.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fott, and then we'll go to Commissioner Slater.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to support the idea that we do put a limitation on the temporary signs such as these. Completely agree with what Lisa was saying about the length of time that they often remain in place. And I think it's important to encourage more greenery and reduce that sort of visual clutter that she was mentioning. And by placing a limitation on the square footage would certainly help to achieve that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Slater, followed by Commissioner Ekus.
Thanks. So, Lisa, you raised the issue that some of these get tattered over a period of time. Are any of the standards related to, intactness? To what extent, it's fresh and clean and not in tatters?
Aaron, I think there's something in the sign code about
Well maintained, I guess.
well
would probably
maintained.
be-
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have, yes, existing language about maintaining it and making sure it's not a hazard to the public.
Is that sufficient for enforcement purposes?
Yes.
Okay.
To an extent. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So if it were full of shotgun holes, you could say you could have it taken down.
Yeah.
I guess the
All right,
flip
thank-
side to that would be if we don't let them put up as many to begin with, and it's less we have to go out and say, now it's destroyed, please take it down.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it is just a matter of what angle I'm looking at them at, because some of them I'm addressing the length of time, some of them I'm addressing because they are just completely in shreds.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ekus, you have a hand raised.
Thank you. I actually have a couple questions. One has to do with what kind of feedback or have you gotten on these proposed changes so far? And the second has to do with enforcement, particularly when it comes to signs in the right-of-way and what we might expect in the future, particularly since we do have a couple months of an election coming up here. And I know at least during that period of time, there's often a lot of signs placed in right-of-way. So I'm wondering what the nature of enforcement would be. Does it involve taking them down? Does it involve finding people? What would be those steps? But so I'm curious about that, as well as what kind of feedback you've gotten about these proposals so far.
Sure. So we're right at the beginning process of beginning our outreach, beginning our work sessions to talk about this new proposal for the sign code. So we do have a few other work sessions lined up. I think April 19th, we're going to be talking about some of the changes to process, some of the general standards, some of the enforcement sections. In May, we have discussion about some of the changes we're making to permanent signage and how it relates to each of the zones. So we're really right at that beginning phase here with this proposal. Beginning that process. I'll speak real quick to the political signs. When it's election season, we do have some information that's available on our website. We try to make available to the different campaigns before they're going out placing signs, just informing them of what our code requirements are for temporary signage.
Well, my question had more to do with enforcement.
Yes,
what the
Stephanie.
expectations are on how that might be enforced.
So typically when I go out and I get the signs out of the right of way, I do pick them up. If they're not directly related to a business, then I have them and I note whose signs do I have, and I have a spreadsheet that I keep track, and I contact everyone that I have their signs and give them the opportunity to come and get them and educate them on why I picked them up and what are some options for displaying their signs in the future. There are some people that have decided to continue to put signs out even after the fact. And so I start cases and then I send out kind of more notices where it's kind of a written warning and go from there. But mostly it's been well received and a lot of, oh, I didn't know, thank you for letting me know kind of thing.
Yeah. So you do pick them up.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So for going forward, Aaron, then if people are listening tonight or in either of the other two work sessions that you'll have, they should just contact you directly with concerns, or are you reaching out to the business community?
Yeah, you can go ahead and send comments directly to me, apanko@cityofsalem.net. We have sent this to some of our local sign contractors as well to get feedback from them. And then we'll look to, speaking to any group that has questions about the proposal going forward.
Great. Any more questions for Aaron? I am not, Commissioner Levin.
Not a question, but a comment, food for thought. In theorizing on Commissioner Yukis's comments about enforcement and fines on political signs during campaign season, I might propose that the city also consider lifting the ban on signs in the public right-of-way during political season. Because political signs are small, they don't impact the vision triangle, and it is a temporary season that we only see every couple of years or every 4 years. So maybe there is justification for public good to have those signs out. There are lots of properties where the private property is set back so far that to put a political sign on the property doesn't do any good, because the public right of way is so wide that the grassy strip where it could be placed to have some visibility is not allowed. So something to consider.
If I could respond to that.
Commissioner Ekus, followed by Commissioner Slater.
I think one of the problems and one of the reasons that it's not allowed in the right of way is that it is political. And having a sign in your property implies an endorsement. And that does not seem to me a proper thing to be done on a public right of way. It's fine on private property, but to use a public right of way to imply an endorsement or to promote a particular candidate doesn't seem to me proper for public property.
Thank you, Commissioner Ekus. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. This is an interesting question Commissioner Levine has raised here. I think it is definitely worth a conversation about whether or not we should consider being more liberal with our political signs. I understand where Commissioner Ekus is coming from, but I would take the opposite approach in that public space is a great space to engage in political advocacy. That's what it's there for. I've filed lawsuits to get access to public spaces. So I don't know quite exactly where I fall on this question, but I would hope that we can take this up one more time.
So before I go to you, Commissioner Levin and Commissioner Fott, Dan, you turned on your camera. That makes me think you want to say something.
Yep. Please continue with the discussion, but one thing is that we can't do is allow one type of content. So if we were going to allow, political signs in the right of way, which I probably wouldn't recommend, but if we were, it would be all signs. So the student loan sign, the sell your car sign, all the other stuff would be allowed in as well.
Okay, that's a good point. Commissioner Levin, followed by Fott, followed by Goebel.
Okay, well, Dan just rained on everybody's parade. So I'm going to continue this thought just for the sake of debate and for philosophizing on the subject. But the public right-of-way where signs are typically placed is the landscape strip between the street and the sidewalk. And what Commissioner Yukis fails to recognize is that the private property owner is responsible for care and maintenance of that public right-of-way. So if I'm paying to have the grass mowed, the weeds pulled, and those public trees trimmed, then why don't I get to pick what signs go in that area? There's an interesting series of questions to be thought through on that. But I liked the idea before Dan brought up that we have to let everybody in, was that there was maybe something special about political season because it's related to public good and the direction of community, or I don't know how we look at that. But in any event, that was my theory on the subject.
Okay, and I'll let you, Commissioner Ekus, get back to that because I know you want to respond, but first let me go to Commissioner Fott and Goebel, who've had their hands raised. Commissioner Fott.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I agree with Commissioner Ekus in this. I think it's very important that our public spaces remain public and that we do not show support or create spaces for divisive content. And it's really important to keep those landscaped areas landscaped and pleasant for pedestrian traffic and safe. And as we know, temporary signs do have a tendency to be less durable than permanent signs. And so I think even though they are temporary, the likelihood that it would become a bit of an eyesore is high. So I really think it should not go in the direction of allowing any signs like that in the right of way outside of the revocable permit type.
Thank you, Commissioner Fox. Commissioner Goebel.
I agree also with Commissioner Fott. I think that it leaves too much room for contentious situations. For example, if you're a business owner adjacent to a business that chooses to put up like a political candidate sign that you're not in support of, that it leads to just a lot of opportunities for just contention and I just agree that I think that our commercial zones, while I think it's wonderful to have that opportunity for business owners to advertise the business that's located there, I think that the opportunity for that business owner to project their political views isn't necessarily in line with the intent of the code there.
Thank you, Commissioner Goebel. Followed by Commissioner Heller.
I'm sorry, did you call on me or Commissioner Heller?
Commissioner Ekus, I called on you.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me just throw this out in response to the concept that if the property owner is responsible for maintaining the right-of-way, what happens if someone puts a political sign in the right-of-way and it's a public right-of-way, and our decision is that, well, if anybody can put the sign in there, so soon we have several political signs in there because it's a public right-of-way, and now we've got a whole bunch of clutter in a public right-of-way. The alternative is you say that, well, because I'm responsible for the maintenance, I get to decide which sign goes in there. And that just doesn't seem to me a workable or a justifiable position to say that I get to decide what goes in the right-of-way because I'm responsible for maintaining and landscaping the appearance of the right-of-way. So you either have a private property owner deciding what goes in the right-of-way, or you have a right-of-way that gets cluttered because anybody, as the city attorney has said, can have the right to put something in there. And that's just, both of those are kind of separate from the appearance of the public right-of-way, public endorsement of somebody. It seems to me that it seems to me very problematic to go down that road.
Thank you, Commissioner Ekus. Commissioner Heller, followed by Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. I would like to ask the city attorney, is there something about like a timeline? I don't like the political signs in the public right of way. Well, we just state that first, but I was thinking, how about a timeline during election season or something, or would that be capricious? Could we make something like, within a month of an election? That's for the city attorney.
Yeah, I think legally you could have a temporary rule that allowed different types of signs that aren't allowed during the other times of the year. And I suppose you could make an argument that by doing it during election season, you're favoring political speech over other types of speech. But I don't really want to venture an opinion on how the courts would rule on that. But again, it would be all types of content. I could go up to White's Cafe and put a temporary sign that says "Don't eat at White's Cafe."
Okay. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Hill?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Slater, back to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to see if I could capture a sense of where we're all at. It sounds like we have different opinions on the political sign issue, but in light of the city attorney's view that we would have to permit all temporary signs, I'm not hearing anyone make the case for that.
Nope.
Are you? So in terms of the staff, we're not asking the staff to pursue
No.
this in any way. Okay,
No.
I just wanted to check on
Yeah,
that.
and I was careful not to weigh in since I'm running for office, but I don't like the sign, any of the signs, as much as I do love Commissioner Levin and Slater. I don't think signs, any kind of signs in a right of way is a good move. So, but I was quiet until then. Okay, any more comments on this lovely sign discussion? I think this is the most verbose we have been. Okay, seeing none, thank you, Mr. Panko, for your presentation, and we'll look forward to hearing more.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. So moving on to information reports, we don't have any. We don't have anybody else signed up for public comment. Planning administrators report. Lisa, you might want to mention the Myers discussion last night, Council. I mean, just kind of
Do I
curious.
have to? Do I
Yes.
have to? Okay, sure. There was a subdivision at City Council last night. So as a reminder, subdivisions are planning administrator decisions. If they're appealed, they come to Planning Commission, but in lieu of that, they could be called up by the council and then they don't come to the Planning Commission. The Myers Farm subdivision, if you've read the paper at all for the last few months, you've heard of it, was called up by the City Council and they had a hearing. It was like, I don't know, early January or something. They held the record open, et cetera. And they did have their deliberations last night and overturned my decision and denied this. It's totally fine. They denied the subdivision. So yeah, that happened last night. It was pretty interesting because there were many different motions. A motion to modify it, which barely failed, and then a motion to just approve it outright, which failed, and then eventually a motion to deny it. So it's still ongoing. The council still has ex parte, as you guys are familiar, because they have to adopt written facts and findings to come. So very interesting subdivision, a lot of community input on that one. Also, the council last night called up the Planning Commission decision for the comp plan zone change in West Salem, the single family to multi, I guess it was RA to RM2, that you just issued a decision on. So they will have a hearing to review that decision. It'll probably be in early April. Our Salem's coming up on the 15th. There's a lot of documents, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of findings for the case, in addition to just things that you've already seen in various versions, the draft comp plan itself. We're proposing to adopt the HNA. We have over 10,000 properties we're rezoning, redesignating, et cetera. So we are releasing the staff report early. It will be sent to you tomorrow and put on our Salem webpage tomorrow for the public to view, instead of just the regular 1 week ahead of time. So also there's no requirement that you have the hearing and make, close it and make a recommendation the very first night. So we get a lot of testimony, more questions, whatever. It can be more than one hearing. So, and it's up to you how many pages of the findings you want to read. But for each, property that's going from one thing to another, there has to be specific findings about how it meets all the statewide planning goals. So Eunice and Austin have been writing those for months and months and months, and I've been spending weeks and weeks and weeks reviewing them. So, people say, like, why is it taking so long to get to this hearing? When you see the documents tomorrow, you will know why it's taking so long. So I think those are all the updates I had.
Okay. I think Commissioner Slater has a question for you, and then Commissioner Ekus.
Yeah, I have two questions for you, Lisa. Well, one's more a comment. I will be very eager in the presentation that the staff puts together to understand how any zoning changes or how the new comp plan is going to affect traffic in West Salem, just because I know that will come to us. So the more that you can get ahead of that and anticipate some of the concerns or questions, that would help me anyway. That was my comment. And my question is, with all of the individual land zone changes, do people have the right to appeal those to us if they disagree? Are we looking at a potential docket of hundreds of property cases to hear?
They're all one case that you're going to be considering on the 15th, and you will be making a recommendation to the council. So there's no appeal because the decision is made by the council, and any appeal of that would be to LUBA. But we have notified all of those property owners. So there will be people that will be coming to that hearing to say, please vote on this tonight. I'm dying for this zone change to take place for me to build X, Y, and Z, because they call units every week. There will also be people that will come that will say, I don't want this change, don't do this. Right. And so
our criteria will be, if we've got some people that want the zone change and some people that don't, and it's all one case, it will just be, is this, it's best for overall, and we don't have to pick in between?
So you can make individual decisions on individual properties. For example, you could say, we recommend that the city council adopt this entire package, except for removing this property, this property, this property. The ones where people are generally objecting are going to multifamily, but we do have to rezone almost 300 acres to multifamily to meet our projected deficit. So
Thank you.
It wasn't necessarily find every property owner that agrees. It was an analysis citywide of the city's need for multifamily land.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ekus, you're up.
Well, my question, I raised this earlier, of the mask mandate is being lifted on March 12th and our hearing's the 15th. Is any consideration being given to, are we doing this in person or are we still doing it by Zoom?
Councillor Atchison has his hand raised.
Thank you, Jane. I was just in a meeting earlier today, so I can provide you what I know is there was this bill passed by the legislature this past year, maybe 2 years ago, that basically requires governing bodies, including like the Planning Commission, that if you allow virtual attendance by the members of the commission, you also have to allow virtual attendance and participation by the public. So what we're talking about is potentially doing hybrid meetings where commissioners could be in person, and then some of the commissioners could be virtual. And if we do that, then we have to allow that same ability for the public, which gets really complicated. It's not just a matter of opening up a computer screen and a Zoom link. Our tech folks and our communications folks have been trying to figure this out for city council for several months now, and we've actually had to commission upgrades for the communications equipment in council chambers to try to accommodate it, and it's not there yet. So it'll be a few months probably, it would be my guess, until we're even ready to accommodate this hybrid meeting concept. So it would work, through YouTube, so you could actually hear people listening in virtually could hear everyone else and that sort of thing. So to answer your question more briefly, no, we're going to be continuing with virtual meetings for the time being. That includes council. Of course, council could decide tomorrow to say, no, we're going to meet in person and we'll figure it out. But to comply with that new state law that requires the virtual attendance and participation by members of the public, it takes a little figuring out.
So you don't see a scenario where we just go back in person and we go back the way we did it?
Potentially. I know some of the things that we've talked about is for boards and commissions, do we require all of the city's boards and commissions to be completely virtual with no opportunity for in-person attendance by members or the public? That makes it easier to accommodate. Or do you say no virtual attendance by either members or the public, and that's okay too, and that's also easier to accommodate? It's the hybrid that makes it challenging.
Yeah.
Well, let me just add that I completely understand that, because we've faced that same issue with some other organizations that I'm involved with, such as Salem City Club. And to do a hybrid, you need a different technological arrangement.
Mhm.
And
We're
takes
facing the
time
same
for-
thing. In fact, Commissioner Ekus, we're using Raymond from City Club to do our tech at
Yeah.
Rotary to do both. He's been wonderful, but it's still kind of clunky, at times. It's not an easy fix.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was just curious because this is supposedly I assume this is gonna be a lot of public input and a lot of people. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other questions for Lisa? Okay, we're moving to comments for the good of the order. And Commissioner Slater, you are up to lead us in a discussion on process and procedures, quick overview, and maybe the 3 issues that you raised with staff. And we'll go one by one.
Great, thank you. So I thought that the West Salem Neighborhood Association had raised some important points about our overall process. I do not want to have a conversation about the case or any previous cases, although there may be some examples as we get into a conversation that we can refer to. So I'm much more interested in the larger procedural questions. To me, it seemed that, so the first concern that was raised was whether or not parties would have the ability to challenge or rebut a comprehensive, a staff report, not the supplementary, that's where the supplementary staff report. And I should say, I did have a conversation with Commissioner Heller about this, and I was just relying a bit on her background as an administrative law judge. It seems to me that if there are specific concerns that new information had been inadvertently included, or that there are errors of fact that are being alleged, it seemed very reasonable to me that any party would be able to raise that in a timely way. So my proposal or my thinking is that when we do have a supplementary staff report, that it come in a few days before our hearing, and that there's a period of time then where parties can say with specificity, this is new information, please don't consider it, or this is inaccurate information, here's the correct information. But regardless of the details, I do think it's important that people have an opportunity to say, I disagree, and the Planning Commission has sufficient time to consider that, and we aren't scrambling at the last minute. So that's my thought on that piece. And I'd welcome comments from the staff as well as from my colleagues on that.
Dan, do you want to respond?
Sure, and I'll ask Lisa to come into, because the planning division is primarily responsible for generating these staff reports and getting them out to you on a timely basis, and she knows the procedures for that better than I do. But generally speaking, we try to get any staff report out ahead of time, so before the record closes, so if folks do have an opportunity to respond to that. And in cases where the record is closed to new evidence, we try to get the public to play by the same rules, is that we try not to allow new evidence in. Oftentimes, if there's a gripe or a complaint about something in a staff report, it's more of a, at least in my opinion, it's a difference of opinion as opposed to a factual inaccuracy or intentional misrepresentation. Lisa, can you add to that?
I mean, I just agree with everything Dan said, and obviously, the staff reports go out a week in advance with the agenda, but then when we do a supplemental, kind of all bets are off with supplementals, because generally it means something has come in after the report, and we need to put it, give it to the commission with some context or more information we want to provide. That's why supplementals will come out during that time period, between the staff report and the original staff report and the meeting. And then obviously when we do the 777, then that dictates when the information is sent to the commission, because we hold the first 7 and send it, and the second 7 and send it, and then the applicant's final written rebuttal, which we talked about at the last meeting when Commissioner Heller first brought up the topic of sort of like when we give things to the commission. Just like Dan said, though, we do during the 777 hold ourselves to the same standard as the public. So if we have new evidence to submit based on what happened at the hearing, then we submit it during that first 7-day period. And then if we are just rebutting what somebody has submitted in that first 7 days, then we do it in the second 7-day period. So we hold ourselves to the same standard as far as we don't, find something new and then submit it during the rebuttal period. Now, obviously, if somebody disagrees and thinks that there is something that we submitted or anybody submitted during that second 7 days that was new evidence, then they should be sending it to staff and raising that with specificity for us to understand what the concern is, and then we would address it at that time.
Commissioner Heller has a question.
Well, I just wanted to make a statement. My concern was that my first concern is that I don't feel I have enough time when things are coming in at 5 p.m. on the day of the hearing or the day before the hearing. I think we need, if this is possible under the rules, and I don't know, maybe cut off at 5 p.m. the Friday before. Now, in addition to that, if people do think that there's new information somehow coming in, I don't mind them filing something after that, but they really have to be specific. I don't want to hear something about, oh, there's new evidence. Well, if there's new evidence, tell me what it is and how it affects the commission's record. So that's the kind of thing I'm really concerned about, because I don't feel that we often have time enough to really digest what our cases are about.
I agree. Lisa, you want to respond to that, and then I'll go to Goebel.
Yeah, and then Dan, if Dan wants to jump in, but if we're not talking about during the open record period, and it's just the hearing is coming up and it's that night, people can submit. I don't think we can put a deadline. People can submit and testify all the way up, including during the hearing. So those of you might remember in chambers, people bring their written testimony, and we have a scanner. We could scan it and then hit copy 12 copies. And Shelby doesn't know this will be her job in the future because she's never been in chambers, but the staff assistant would walk it around and hand out the copies. So I don't think we can do, we recommend in our notice a cutoff. We say submit your comments by this date to get in the staff report so we can address them. But beyond that, people have the right to just submit their testimony up to the hearing. Is that correct, Dan?
That is right, because it's a public hearing, the record's still open at that point, so they can still submit things. But what I could suggest is that if you've gotten a lot of testimony the day of the hearing or too close to the hearing for you to fully digest, there's nothing wrong with you closing the hearing and the record and continuing deliberations to a future date. I mean, that sometimes there's a 120-day rule that comes into play, and usually we can work with the applicant to extend that, because many times it's the applicant's representative who submits that 30-page document as they walk into chambers. So sometimes they're not willing to, but most of the time they are. They don't really want to make you guys mad by not, giving you another couple weeks on the 120-day rule.
And I think Lisa brought that up in the hearing the last meeting, that that's an option if we weren't up against that 120. Commissioner Goebel.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly what Lisa said, but that also as a full-time working mom, I totally relate to that, Lisa, that I totally have times where I feel like, I don't have time to review all this, but I'm not afraid to just say, hey, I didn't have a chance to review the comments that came in today at 5 p.m. and that's totally fine too. And if that affects, if the applicant feels like their testimony wasn't heard, they can request an extension or they can provide verbal testimony as well. And so I think as long as we're just frank about, that it's not always possible to review a whole pile of information that comes in at the last minute, but there's also options for giving us that time that we need as well.
And by rule, any participant in an initial hearing has the right to either a continued hearing or to keep the record open. We ask them to make that request in a timely manner during the hearing.
Yep. They're usually pretty clear about it.
Usually.
Okay, other discussion on this first point. Commissioner Slater, are you satisfied with the discussion? Do you want to probe any further?
Well, I was trying to make that decision right now.
Well, Commissioner Levin has a question. Maybe he's just going to do it.
We'll go. Bought me time.
Commissioner Levin.
Thank you, President Griggs. This is not a question. I have some comments to share after listening to the statements from Mr. Easterly and Mr. Anderson earlier. And I wanted to wait to share those until an appropriate time. And it seems like this is the end of that appropriate time before we move on to something else. This is not the first time I've heard Mr. Easterly or Mr. Anderson speak before Planning Commission. As with other times, the information presented by Mr. Anderson this evening was not correct. There were statements taken out of context that he has recrafted the I'm trying to find the right words to describe it, but the narrative of what was said. So I want to be clear for the record. When I said at the last hearing that I stepped in it, I was making a reference to opening the email before having confirmation from staff and the city attorney that the document was okay to be read and shared. My comment, as Mr. Anderson presented it this evening, left for interpretation that, quote, I stepped in it, unquote, referred to some action during the hearing. That is not correct. And I do not appreciate the mischaracterization by Mr. Anderson. Furthermore, the Roberts Rules of Order, which clearly state that when a point of order is raised, it may being the key word in that sentence, may be addressed by the chair. If that chair finds that there is potential cause for a rule to be broken. Based on what was shared when that point of order was raised, which was after the end of the 7 days for final rebuttal, and the comments from staff, I did not feel that there was a rule that had been broken. So I chose not to call on the point of order. I want this documented in the record so it is clearly understood by everybody on the commission, as well as those that are in the public that have come before us time and time again and made comment about land use actions in their neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Slater, that gave you some time to think about it.
It did, and I used that productively, even while listening to Commissioner Levin.
There you go.
So Lisa, just so I understand correctly, if there is a supplemental staff report and a party has a concern about either an error and not an error, not a disagreement of opinion, I understand that that's not relevant here, but if they assert that there's a factually incorrect statement, or they assert that new evidence has been introduced in that supplemental statement, they're then to communicate that with staff. Staff will evaluate that and then advise the commission on whether to hear it or not, or what is the resolution there?
Dan's got his hand raised.
If I could, Commissioner Slater, I'd like to clarify a couple of things. One, if the supplemental staff report contains a factual error, it's a factual error. That it's an issue that they can take up on appeal. It's not really appropriate to bring that to the commission and say, hey, they made an error fact. If there's a procedural violation, my preference is that if someone sees a procedural violation that affected their rights, they can bring that objection to the city. If they want to send it to the planning commission and they don't talk about the substance of the application, it's technically on ex parte, fine, go ahead. don't send it to one commissioner and then hope it gets spread around. The better way of doing it, and the way I would ask folks to do it, is to contact staff, contact me if you need to. Contact Tom Kupani, the attorney for the Planning Commission. And we can take a look at it. And as Lisa said, you know, if there's something there, then fine. You know, we can reopen the record as we've done recently in a couple of cases. But you know, technically, they're correct in that if they want to say, "Hey, you committed a procedural violation and it's affecting my rights," and you haven't made that final decision yet, yeah, sure, raise the issue. That this virtual hearing thing, I'm not a big fan of, even though I like sitting in my guest room for these evenings. I hope you can't hear my cats because they're kind of annoyed with me right now because it's Tuesday night. But it's not real conducive to efficient public hearings on quasi-judicial land use matters. So, you know, one of the things that the last time I stepped in it at a planning commission public hearing, you know, we had to reopen the record to address the issues that were raised, and I could have done a much better job of identifying those things during the meeting and would have solved a lot of issues. But you know, we try to give a Zoom pause, I think they call it, at the, you know, as we're closing the record, to see if someone's got those sort of procedural issues they want to bring up. And we need to be more mindful of that for folks who are participating in the meetings, as well as not just the staff or the commission members, but the members of the public as well.
Was that the clarity that you needed? Because I know that Commissioner Ickes also has his hand raised. Can we go to him?
I am done and willing to move on to point 2.
Okay, well, let me listen to see what Commissioner Ickes has, because it might be to this point.
Thank you. Well, I'm trying to, some things were said that I'm not sure if followed. I want to make sure I've got it right. If there is an alleged factual error and someone comes before in the hearing, are we saying that the commission cannot make a decision on that candidate? We can't hear the arguments over the fact, and we cannot include that in our decision, and that is the only option if there is a alleged factual error, as appeal the only option, or does the commission have any role to make a decision on the debate over factual error?
So certainly you do. So there's a timing issue involved here. So, you know, when the original staff report is submitted, there's a period for folks to respond to that. That's a good opportunity to address those. And I think I'm not that familiar with this current land use case, and I know we don't want to talk about specifics, and thank you for Commissioner Slater for raising that issue and not bringing those kinds of things up. But I think what apparently occurred was after the record closed, this objection got raised, and there was a supplemental staff report that they had issues with. You know, in that kind of situation, if they want to raise, you know, an objection to it, that's fine. But really, if it's a disagreement about a fact, or if the staff report made an error in a fact, it's really not appropriate to do that. Technically, if you're gonna address that sort of issue, you're gonna have to reopen the record. You got to provide notice to everyone who participated, and you're going to allow folks to address that, you know, allegation.
Okay, are you talking about a particular procedural situation like we just had, or are you talking generally?
I'm talking whenever someone raises a factual allegation or some sort of factual issue after the record is closed.
After it closed, okay. But if it's before the record's closed, it's perfectly within the commission's prerogative.
Absolutely. And one other point, I'm sorry,
that's
going on in this thing, but
there.
You know, one of it's been this way at the city since I started here in 2007, and I've continued it. But when these sorts of after record things come in, we don't bring it to the planning commission, we don't bring it to the council, we don't bring it to the historic landmarks commission and say, hey, you know, this came in late, or this is outside the scope of the record. Do you want to admit it? My opinion, and there's no right or wrong rule necessarily on this. There's no clear bright line state law that says you have to do it one way or the other, although I think folks would disagree with me. The best way to do it is to have staff take a look at that and say, no, it's late. It's had to be in by 5, it's 5:01. I'm sorry, it's late. It doesn't get in. We don't need to take that to the planning commission and say, hey, this came out of 501, should you let it in or not? Other issues are, in a previous case, we had a limited scope of the record. I had asked or required one of the folks who submitted testimony to redact a portion of their testimony because it was outside the scope. One of the assignments of error in that case, it's at LUBA right now, was that I shouldn't have done that and the city shouldn't have redacted it at all. And if anyone was going to make that decision, it should have come to the Planning Commission. In my mind, it's better that that stuff get done before it gets to you, so you're not poisoning the well, and you've already got that information that you shouldn't have had to begin with. And you can say, oh no, we're going to disregard this as part of our consideration, but it's already there, it's already in your head. The better way of doing it, in my mind, is for staff to make that determination, and we're very careful about that. We err on the side of caution in 99% of the time. A lot of the stuff you get when the scope of the record is limited is well beyond the scope, and we let it go anyway.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are you good, Commissioner Akers? Okay. Commissioner Slater, back to you. You're muted.
Thank you.
You're
so
welcome.
The second issue that West Salem raised was the role of staff and concerns that staff are being an advocate for the applicant. So I am not so concerned about this. I certainly look to staff to complete and provide full information to us. But I do think because it was raised, I want to raise it up and see if staff has a thought that they want to share with us, or if other people have a concern. And I should say, my background as an advocate does make me a little sympathetic when we have situations where it really sounds like the staff is kind of piling on in support of an application, and we've got the neighborhood group opposed to it. But I personally understand, from my position as a planning commissioner, the utility of that happening. But I want to bring that out in case other people have some thoughts, or if staff want to explain this or respond.
I want to give Lisa a chance to respond, but I just want to state the standard first. And it's basically that the burden of proof is on the applicant in these applications. They're the ones that have to demonstrate by providing sufficient evidence that yes, they've met the criteria. Staff's job is to review the application and all the evidence that's been submitted and all the testimony, and make a recommendation to you. At the end of the day, it's your job to weigh that evidence and determine which side you think is more credible and make that decision. Now I'll let Lisa.
And I have a follow-up.
Commissioner Slater wants to intervene.
I have a follow-up to that, if I may. So again, I'm putting my head here in the space of an advocate. And what I would say is that sometimes an application has a set of information, and then in the staff report, the staff has supplemented that with other important and persuasive information as to why an application should be granted. So I'm not just evaluating the applicant, I'm evaluating the applicant's material plus the additional material that staff has added. And I could give a couple examples where the staff's information has been extremely important in how I voted, and that was not in the original application itself. So that's my concern, and I think that is what some of the neighborhood associations or opponents of an application might be getting at.
Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely our job is to evaluate the application, but we're also just evaluating the proposal against the criteria. If we said every time, well, they said, for example, this is a collector street, but it's an arterial street, do we send it back to them because they had misinformation? That doesn't matter for the case, right? It doesn't matter for the criteria. We can just write the street is a minor arterial and here's the standard. Do we bother making them go back or saying they misspoke about this? And there's also just some things that applicants are never going to know in enough detail to ever put it in their application, but that we know, like information about the multifamily land deficit, right? I mean, now they all know it, but that's because staff's been writing it in our reports for the last 5 years. In the beginning, it's not like every person knew that was doing a land use application at the city. And most people don't get every single I dotted every single T for any type of land use application or permit in the city. They just don't, period. So there's always going to be some amount of us looking at the overall proposal and then the criteria. And even though they may not have listed the 5 reasons it should be approved. I got 3 of them, and we think there's 5 reasons to explain why it should be approved. We don't see anything wrong with telling you those 5 reasons because they're based on our larger plans, our policies, how the code has been interpreted in the past, that kind of thing. We definitely are not advocates for the applicants. And if you ask them their thoughts on staff, they would not say we're friends. Their thoughts are that we're too tough on them and don't particularly like us. Obviously, if you're a neighbor or neighborhood association person, you don't see that side because you don't necessarily see what the application looked like when it first came in, how much we pushed back, how much we worked with them to get it to a place where it could be approved or where it met the criteria. Just there might be disagreements on if something should be approved or not. And we're always going to give you our recommendation. Our recommendation is based on, the criteria, the adopted policies. And then obviously sometimes you're hearing an appeal where I have already issued a decision. So, I'm probably going to come to you and say, uphold the decision. I think I got it right the first time. It's not me advocating, it's just explaining why the decision was issued the way it was. And again, why we think you should uphold that decision. Or sometimes obviously new stuff comes in, then we say we think you should modify it or add this condition to address this concern. And then I think all the commissioners know, because you did it very recently, you don't have to go with staff recommendation, right? You aren't always persuaded by our opinion. Same with city council. Last night overturned my decision. So it's just us telling you why we think it meets the criteria. Ultimately up to the commission to decide.
Mr. Heller.
Thank you. I understand that many of the neighborhood groups feel that the city staff is on the applicant's side, but to me in the presentations, it doesn't come off that way. It comes off, I look at it as an advisory. If they fill out an application and add additional reasons for approval or disapproval, I appreciate that. I want the whole picture. And I would say that some of the applicants get very upset with the staff. And I consider them more of a neutral body, more just a review with a neutral recommendation, not a biased one. So that's just, but I can understand how neighborhood groups may take not having their concerns approved, how they could feel that the staff favors the applicant, but it doesn't work that way.
Yep, I agree. Other comments on this point? And Commissioner Slater, did you hear enough? If there are not other comments to.
Yep. Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm certainly satisfied. Thank you.
Okay.
So
you want to get to the third one?
Third and final. Just beat that horse. So again, the West Salem Neighborhood Association has raised the question, or inferred anyway, is there a role for the commission if there is some sort of grievance during the land use hearing process? I mean, so what I interpreted the West Salem Neighborhood Association as saying is like, we have been treated unfairly. So the question for me is there a role for us in addressing that or not? I mean, we're not a supervisory body, we're not an oversight body. Maybe there's nothing to do. On the other hand, we are citizens who are doing this. And some of our job is to have a relationship with those communities. So I'm not sure what the answer is to this, but they did raise it, and I thought it would be at least worthwhile if we had the conversation about it.
Lisa or Dan, either one.
No one wants to talk. No one wants to take that one.
I guess I'll start. I mean, if there's issues that are more broad ranging beyond a single application, it would be good to not hold that particular procedure hostage to resolve them. I don't know what the answer is as far as some sort of planning commission monitored mediation between a neighborhood association and city staff But it shouldn't happen in the midst of a public hearing or a consideration of a particular application. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would concur with that. Been to West Salem, staff goes when they're invited, even when we're not invited sometimes. Talk to Mr. Easterly, Mr. Anderson all the time. So they definitely know how to get a hold of staff and talk with staff outside of planning commission meetings. And I think just it's hard, I guess, to talk more generally because it's generally our interactions at the planning commission when a neighborhood's involved is very specific to a land use case and the actual timing and the process that we're in. You know, neighborhood associations can appeal land use decisions at the local level for free, or the council, if you aren't hearing an appeal, you're issuing an initial decision, the city council could call up your decision. So in that way, if they feel like the process that they participated in at the planning commission level didn't have the outcome that they wanted, and or on top of that, that they didn't get to participate fully or weren't treated well, then obviously the neighborhood associations have a special ability to appeal for free. In Salem, they have that special right afforded to them. And then generally when they ask their city councilor to call up the case, the city councilor will do that for them. So I guess that's what I have to offer.
Comments amongst the commissioners? You know, kind of related to the West Salem Neighborhood Association. And I know that Commissioner Slater brought this up as an idea, which is another great idea. And that's to have, now that we've got our new commissioners on, having a kind of 101 on the traffic impact analysis, how that's done, as a refresher for us and as a information for new members. So I'm hoping that that's going to get on the agenda soon.
Yes, that will be scheduled, but not till after our Salem is through the commission.
Commissioner Ekus, you had your hand raised. You're muted.
I really want to second that because I participated in a case in Salem Heights where there was a great deal of confusion as what was meant by a traffic impact analysis. Because the code says that there's one required under certain circumstances. And yet there are other traffic impact analysis, such as, I think it came up in this last case, as to a traffic analysis, which wasn't actually a traffic impact analysis as would be required by the code, but it was a traffic analysis. So I got very confused when I started looking at the code as to the difference between a traffic impact analysis and the traffic impact analysis that is done before the traffic impact analysis is required.
By the TPR.
So that would be real helpful to have some understanding of what kind of traffic analyses are required and expected under certain circumstances.
Yeah. So back to the current topic, the third point, any other discussions on that? Any other probing comments you want to make, Slater, to get us to talk more about that, or are you good?
Nope, I'm good. I feel like I've done my job and I appreciate everyone's patience.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it forward, as do I think everybody does on our commission. So other comments of the good of the order, because if not, I would love, Commissioner Levin, I would love for you to talk.
I'm not going to let you off the hook this evening because I have more comments to share, and I've been preparing for this, although I'm short on a few technical details. But we are so focused on West Salem that it just seems right to bring this up this evening and to get this on the record. And then, Lisa, when City Council hears the case, can you email me and let me know when that is? I think I want to give some testimony about what I'm about to say as it relates to West Salem. West Salem has an inherent problem, and we have heard it for 6+ years on the Planning Commission, and the problem hasn't changed. And it has become abundantly clear to me through my education sitting on this Planning Commission that the solution to the traffic issues in West Salem are not related to the bridges that we have crossing West Salem to East Salem. As much as people want to argue with me about that, the reality is that the traffic problems related to West Salem are simply due to the fact that it is poorly designed for traffic circulation. And so there is not a east-west and then north-south connection. Marine Drive has been on the city of Salem books for a long time as a future street. Marine Drive fixes the problem for West Salem. So to summarize, so that we can all log off and go enjoy our families, Marine Drive won't get built unless the city of Salem comes up with, I estimate, roughly $72 million. We can have another conversation about how I came up with that number. It's very arbitrary. But if we took $72 million for roughly 5-mile stretch of road in West Salem with land entitlements, there was 30,000 people that lived in West Salem. There might be more now, but if we broke that down, if West Salem wants to fix their traffic problems, then my recommendation is go bond Marine Drive and get it done. It's $2,400 per household at 30,000 people in West Salem. A bond isn't collected over 1 year. If this bond was accelerated and collected over 5 years, West Salem residents would each pay a whopping $480 to bond Marine Drive, which would completely eliminate all the traffic issues with Wallace Road. That is the problem with West Salem. It is not discussed. It has become a trigger point for me as we see land use requests come through on West Salem, and this constant argument about the horrible developers, the how dare us at the Planning Commission. And the reality is that West Salem has this inherent problem, and it's not going to get fixed unless West Salem residents just go bond Marine Drive. Simple as that. Problem solved.
Okay. Any more good thoughts there? You're good? You're good. So more comments for the good of the order. I wanted just to take a minute and have Commissioner Fott and Commissioner Egas just tell us just a few minutes about you, because I didn't hear that at the last meeting. And I know about Commissioner Egas, but let's start with you, Commissioner Fott.
Sure. Well, I'm an architect with CB2 Architects in town, and I've lived in Salem for almost 10 years now, and felt that I wanted to offer my expertise and knowledge about the built environment to contribute to the commission. Awesome. And the continued improvement of Salem.
And you guys are the firm that designed our Rotary Amphitheater on Riverside Park.
Yes.
Commissioner Egas.
Well, I grew up in Molalla, not far away. Yeah. Went to the University of Oregon and to be into journalism. Ended up working for the legislature and then for a congressman there for 9 years. Then I got elected to the legislature and served as a representative from part of the Eugene area for 2 sessions before I got appointed to the Public Utility Commission. At that point, which was about 30 years ago, I moved up to Salem. I've lived here ever since. I served 14 years on the Public Utility Commission during some pretty exciting times, such as the closure of the Trojan nuclear plant, US West service problems, and actually the creation of the Oregon Energy Trust as well. After I left the commission, I started consulting mostly internationally, so I was out of the country a lot. When I retired, I started to become more involved in local activities here with the neighborhood association and a particular development on Salem Heights, which has led to some work on a Salem Heights improvement plan. And I decided, given that we're in the midst of all these multi-year reviews of different plans, that now would be a good time to be on the commission. And I thought my previous experience, particularly the Public Utility Commission, might be valuable. So I decided to apply.
Well, welcome to both of you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Any other comments for the good of the order? So with that, I think our next meeting is March 15th, right, Lisa?
That's right. And hopefully you can start reading, get to
Yes.
reading starting tomorrow. So.
Great. Okay, well, with that, unless I see any other hands coming up, and I don't, I will adjourn this meeting and we'll see you the next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.